Welcome to No Nonsense Psychiatry, the podcast that cuts through the noise and the confusion surrounding mental health. My name is Mark and I'm your host, and my goal is to give you the clear, practical information you need to understand your own well-being. No jargon, no fluff, just honest, helpful tools to help you on your journey. Let's dive in.
No nonsense.
Welcome back to No Nonsense Psychiatry, the show that cuts through the noise to get straight to the facts about mental health. I'm your host, Mark. Today we're diving into a single three-syllable word that has become the most misused and misunderstood term in modern psychology: triggered. We hear it everywhere. It's a shorthand term that the internet has broadened drastically to simply mean annoyed, offended or uncomfortable. In a world where being offended is almost an identity, this casual usage is trivialized the clinical definition and the equating to a severe trauma response like panic attack or a flashback with everyday frustration. And let's face it, this just leads to confusion and often mockery, really, which is incredibly invalidating for the actual trauma survivor. But where does the word come from? The truth is, the phenomenon is ancient, but the language is modern. The biology and the psychological response, that involuntary amygdala hijack, where the survival part of your brain takes over, and that's the core biological mechanism, as old as the human brain itself. Clinicians first observed this in veterans with shell shock after World War I, and by the 1970s, as post-traumatic stress disorder, it was formalised and the term triggered or trauma trigger was established. It's described as a sensory cue that causes a profound psychological and physiological reaction, which the individual feels the trauma is happening again. So why are people feeling triggered in 2026? And what does those actual triggers mean? What are they? In this episode, we're going to explore the three major categories of triggers: the interpersonal, the situational, and the sensory. And because you can't change the traffic, the environment, or other people's opinions, we'll finish with no nonsense strategies that you can use immediately, like box breath, breathing, or sensory grounding. And this will counter that overwhelming feeling and bring you back to your rational mind and back online. So stick with us for this no-nonsense episode 92, Feeling Triggered. Social media commentary. Oh my God, that social influencer hot take on coffee culture is so stupid. I'm literally triggered by how wrong she is. A minor frustration. That traffic was absolutely triggering today. I almost lost it. The political discourse. The opposition gets triggered every time we mention taxes. The cultural buzzword. The shorthand term triggered became a widespread internet meme and colloquialism. In this usage, the meaning broadened drastically to simply mean offended, annoyed, or uncomfortable. The casual use trivializes the clinical definition, equating a severe trauma response like a panic attack or flashback with everyday frustration. And this has led to confusion and often mockery, which can be really invalidating for trauma survivors. And in a world where being offended is almost, in my opinion, an identity, but where does the word triggered come from? The history of the term triggered. Is being triggered a new phenomenon? No. The phenomenon is ancient, but the language is modern. The biological and physiological response to trauma is an old survival mechanism that's likely as old as the human brain itself has said. So any person who's suffered significant trauma from historical warfare to natural disasters has experienced their body and mind reacting to present cues that mirror that past threat. So the brain's involuntary amygdala hijack here, and where the survival part of the brain takes over, and it's at the core biological survival mechanism, and the history of the term can be separated into clinical origin and its modern colloquial usage. So in the mid-20th century, the concept of trigger emerged in psychology, specifically in studies related to post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. In World War I and II, earlier forms of this concept appeared in observations of war veterans suffering from shell shock or combat fatigue, and clinicians noted that a seemingly innocuous stimulus like a loud noise or a smell could immediately cause a full-blown relapse or flashback to the trauma, and that signals that a reminder could set off these severe symptoms. By 1970, it was formalised as PTSD and became a formal diagnosis. The term trauma trigger was established to describe an internal emotional thought or external sight or sound cue that prompted an involuntary intense recall and re-experiencing of that original traumatic event. And the response goes far beyond mere discomfort, and it's a profound psychological, physiological reaction where the individual feels the trauma as if it's happening all over again. Digital and colloquial evolution in the 1990s till 2006, the term transitioned into a mainstream vocabulary driven mainly by internet and social media. By the late 1990s, early 2000, in online forums, the practice of using trigger warnings emerged online in message boards and feminist forums like LiveJournal. And this was a genuine effort by survivors of sexual assault and trauma to alert readers to the potential distressing content ahead, giving them a chance to emotionally prepare and avoid the material if needed. And this response existed long before we had a name for it. So why do people feel triggered in 2026? Let's explore some recorded themes, and here are the most common reasons people are being triggered. Interpersonal and relational triggers. And these triggers relate to the dynamics of human interaction and often activate feelings of abandonment, worthlessness and helplessness established in past relationships. And this could form critical or disapproval, so any direct or perceived negative feedback, especially from an authority figure. Rejection or abandonment, feeling ignored, excluded, ghosted, or seeing a relationship end, even temporarily, like a delay in a text response. Betrayal, dishonesty, lying, infidelity, or a breach of trust. Power dynamics, feeling helpless, powerless, or being aggressively dominated by another person. Specific tones of voice, a loud voice, yelling, sarcasm, or a specific inflection that resembles a past aggressor. Arguments or conflict, high-stress situations that resemble a volatile environment from the past. Situational environment triggers, and these are cues related to physical settings, lack of structure or specific circumstances. Loss of control, for instance, being stuck in traffic, rigid scheduling by others, or situations where one cannot dictate the outcome. Closed, crowded spaces can trigger claustrophobia or the feeling of being trapped and unable to escape. Anniversaries or holidays, dates that are tied to a traumatic event or a significant loss. Specific locations, returning to a place where past trauma occurred, and a specific street, a room or a building. Medical procedures, the sight of needles, doctors, or being physically restrained. Financial or legal stress, situations that bring up feelings of instability or overwhelming responsibility. The senses, smell, sight, sound, taste, touch, are strongly linked to memory, and these triggers are often the most instantaneous and surprising. So common examples of sound is loud sudden noises, fireworks, cars backfiring, slamming doors, specific songs, sirens or loud arguments, and linked to trauma types like combat, sudden accidents or domestic violence. Smells, specific perfumes, cleaning products, smoke, alcohol or particularly food spice, and the scent associated with an aggressor or environment during the trauma. Sight, specific colours, clothing styles, facial expressions, especially anger, graphic images in media, flashing lights, and this is all to do with physical assault, accidents or war-related trauma again. Or touch, unwanted touching, being held down, or simply the texture of certain materials could have visions of sexual or physical assault. And then we have the internal triggers. These triggers are not external, they are emotions, thoughts, physical states that remind the individual of how they felt during past traumatic event. And these might be intense emotions, feeling sudden, overwhelming anger, fear, shame or sadness. Vulnerability, any situation that leads to feeling weak, exposed or deeply inadequate. Feeling overwhelmed, a heavy workload, chronic fatigue, or lack of sleep can lower the tolerance of threshold. Physical pain or illness. A persistent headache or bodily pain can remind the nervous system of past injury or illness where the individual felt helpless. Memory flashbacks and this intrusive, spontaneous recall of the event itself. So what can you do when you're feeling triggered, eh? After all, you can't change others, the environment, can you? If the situation arises, you can only change your perception and your behaviour. And this is all we can change, and we'll learn this throughout. Sometimes that means walking away, but you still feel triggered. What can you do? What can you do for you? Here are 3 effective, distinct strategies you can use immediately to counter an intense psychological and emotional symptom of being triggered. There's sensory grounding, the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. I can't count. This technique uses your senses to interrupt the intense emotional loop and immediately pull your awareness back into the present moment, signaling to your brain that you're safe. So you see 5 things. Look around and name 5 things you can see, i.e. a blue pen, a crack in the wall, my brown shoe. Feel 4 things. Acknowledge 4 things you can feel through touch, i.e. texture of my shirt, my feet on the floor, the coolness of the metal phone. Hear 3 things. Note 3 distinct sounds, a car outside, a hum of a fan, or my own breathing. Smell 2 things. Identify 2 things you can smell. You might have coffee or soap on your hands. Taste 1 thing. Identify 1 thing you can even taste, even if it's the residual taste in your mouth, a mint, dryness, or even nothing. Next, there is the psychological regulation or box breathing. And when triggered, breathing becomes shallow and fast, doesn't it? So fueling the fight and flight response, that's basically what's happening. It's fueling it together. So you're getting ready for fight or run away. So box breathing or square breathing forces a structure, a slow pace that stimulates the vagus nerve in your system and sends it directly to the message of safety to your nervous system. Yeah? So you inhale slowly for a count of 4. You hold your breath for a count of 4. You exhale slowly for a count of 4. You hold the empty lung for a count of 4, and you repeat this cycle 5 times. If you focus intently on counting to engage your prefrontal cortex, this helps bring your mind back into logically and online. Yeah, so you're logically bringing it back online. And then there's 3 cognitive distancing and labeling. So this strategy is about creating a mental space between your adult self and the overwhelming emotion. So instead of saying I am terrified, you shift the language to describe the emotion as a temporary state or sensation. Acknowledging the experience without judgment, you say to yourself, this is a feeling of panic, or I'm experiencing a surge of heat and shame right now. You validate the past, you anchor the present. My body feels like it's in danger, but I am in your current location, the year. I am safe now. By labeling the trigger and the resulting emotion, you can reduce its power and begin to re-engage the rational part of your brain. So that brings us to the end of episode 92. We've established that the word triggered may be thrown around casually to mean annoyed or by bad traffic or a stupid social media comment that clinically relates to something far more profound, doesn't it? God, I can't get my words out today. It is the sound of your own survival system, your amygdala, screaming that you are in danger because a present cue unlocked a past trauma. The key takeaway here is one of respect and responsibility. Respect the clinical definition and take responsibility for your own nervous system. When the psychology panic starts, remember your tools. Practice box breathing to regulate your vagus nerve. Use the 5-4-3-2-1 sensory grounding to anchor yourself into the present. And use cognitive labeling to separate the powerful feeling from the current safe reality. If you found this discussion helpful, please share episode 92 of No Nonsense Psychiatry with somebody who needs to understand the difference between being offended and being truly triggered. Thank you for listening. keep practicing those skills, and we'll be back next time to continue cutting through the noise. Before we go, if you found the podcast helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit from it. You can also support the show by subscribing and leaving a review. It only takes a moment, but it makes a big difference in helping us reach more people. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode of No Nonsense Psychiatry.
No nonsense.